I'm Ella, and I can't recall the exact moment I recognized that I wasn't like my sister, Sarah. Perhaps it was when I was 7 and she was 4, and I was helping Mom with dinner as I watched her play with dolls. Or maybe it was all those afternoons when I would glance out our kitchen window and see other children playing outdoors while I washed dishes that were nearly out of my reach. Ella, homework done. Every day after school, Mom would ask in a harsh, expectant voice. Yes, Mom, I would respond, having already tied the oversized apron she had purchased for me on my 6th birthday. A practical gift, she had described it as. All right, now assist me with dinner. You can go play, Sarah, my dear. While I stood on my tiptoes to get to the counter, Sarah would skip off with her black pigtails bouncing. I knew better than to whine even at 7. Mom would always respond, she's still little, whenever I attempted. You are the older sibling. You must lend a hand. Dad was no exception. When Sarah showed him her most recent artwork, which she normally did around homework time, he would come home from work, touch her hair, and then turn to face me with that familiar expression. How are your grades today, Ella? Instead of how was your day, rather, what did you learn? Only grades. Grades are always given. I would remark, all A's, Dad, and he would nod as if that were the very least he needed, since it was. Our modest 2-story home was located in a middle-class area, so it wasn't very large. I hardly ever saw my pals outside of school, even though they lived close by. Doing the dishes, doing the laundry, assisting Sarah with her homework, despite her infrequent attention span, or studying to keep up those flawless grades. There was always something to do. I recall a specific afternoon when I was 10 years old. My teacher was praising me, and my parents were happy because I had just won first place in the regional arithmetic competition. Mrs. Peterson remarked, "You've done such an amazing job raising Ella. Her love for learning is extraordinary." Mom and Dad looked at each other with pride. "Well, we've always encouraged her to read," Mom remarked as she placed her hand on my shoulder. "Haven't we, Ella?" Since daytime was for duties, I wanted to be honest with Mrs. Peterson and admit that I had stayed up late studying by candlelight. That the only motivation I received was the warning that I would be disappointed if I didn't bring something flawless home. But like the excellent daughter I was meant to be, I simply nodded and smiled. In the meantime, no one spoke about Sarah's failed arithmetic test, which she was using to make paper airplanes in the corridor. In our home, things were always that way. Sarah would occasionally catch me grinning, especially when she got away with doing something that would have gotten me a lecture. At the age of 9, she once informed me, "You're just jealous," while I was 12, because Mom and Dad like me better. My hands were still damp from cleaning our shared bathroom when I stood there and looked at her reflection in the mirror that I had just wiped streak-free. Saying, "That's not true." Even still, there was a part of me that questioned whether it was. I was essentially Sarah's personal tutor by the time she began middle school, not voluntarily, but by order of her parents. She would text beneath the table while I sat with her at the kitchen table every afternoon, attempting to explain simple arithmetic. I would remark, "Sarah, you need to pay attention," as I was worn out from my own school day and household duties. "Why?" With that annoying smirk of hers, she would respond, "You'll just end up doing it for me anyway." She was also correct. That's precisely what would occur. "Ella, why isn't Sarah's homework done yet?" Mom would inevitably ask, hands on her hips. "She's not focusing." Then make her focus. "You're supposed to be helping her." So I'd end up doing Sarah's homework while she watched YouTube videos because it was easier than dealing with Mom's disappointment. Meanwhile, Sarah's weekly allowance would appear like clockwork, $20 every Friday. Me, I was lucky if I got $5 a month, usually with a lecture about how Money doesn't grow on trees. The breaking point came when I turned 16. I was tired of watching Sarah flaunt her new clothes and latest gadgets while I wore hand-me-downs and couldn't even buy lunch at school. That's when I saw the Help Wanted sign at Joe's Cafe, just 3 blocks from our house. Joe, a gruff man with kind eyes who'd served me countless hot chocolates over the years, hired me on the spot. The work was hard, waiting tables, cleaning up spills, dealing with grumpy customers, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was earning my own money. That first paycheck felt like freedom in my hands, $850 for a month of part-time work. I should have known better than to leave it on my desk. Ella, Mom's voice rang through the house that evening. "Come down here right now." They were both waiting in the kitchen, my paycheck on the table between them. Dad looked stern, Mom disappointed, expressions I knew all too well. "Why didn't you tell us you were making this much?" Dad demanded. "I just got paid," I stammered. "Well, since you're living in our house and eating our food, you'll be giving us half of this," Mom declared. "It's only fair." The worst part wasn't even giving up half my paycheck. It was what happened next. A week later, Sarah waltzed into our room wearing brand new Nike sneakers. "Look what Mom and Dad bought me with your money," she sang, twirling around. "Guess all that working is good for something after all." I locked myself in the bathroom and cried that night. But it was also when I made my decision. I was getting out of here, and college was my ticket to freedom. My parents would never pay for it. They made that clear every time they talked about how Sarah would need money for college someday. So I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination. I started staying late at school to use the library computers, researching scholarships and free tuition programs. Every spare moment was spent studying for the sets, writing essays, and maintaining my perfect GPA. Graduation day was exactly what I expected it to be, another performance of The Perfect Family starring my parents. I sat through the ceremony in my blue cap and gown, watching them beam from the audience as Principal Roberts called me up as valedictorian. "The Matthews have done an extraordinary job raising Ella," he announced to the crowd. "Her academic achievements are truly remarkable." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue while Dad stood tall, his chest puffed out with pride. I could see them soaking up the praise like they always did, nodding and smiling as other parents congratulated them on their wonderful parenting. What none of them knew was that I'd already received acceptance letters from every college I'd applied to. I'd been checking the mailbox religiously for weeks, intercepting the letters before anyone else could see them. Each congratulations felt like a key to a door I'd been trying to unlock. My whole life, but the best one, the one I'd chosen, was from Riverside State University. Full scholarship, free dormitory housing, and a stipend. It was 4 hours away in the next state over, far enough that I couldn't come home on weekends to help out. I hadn't told them yet. I was waiting for the right moment, which came sooner than I expected at our graduation dinner. Mom had made my favorite pasta, or what she thought was my favorite. She'd never actually asked. We were all sitting around the dining room table when Mom said, serving herself another helping, "Have you thought about what you're going to do now?" I opened my mouth to tell them about Riverside, but before I could get a word out, Mom continued with a bright smile, "I was talking to Joe at the cafe yesterday. He said he'd be happy to take you on full-time. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You could earn so much more and really help out with the family expenses." I took a deep breath. I got accepted to college. Full scholarship at Riverside State. I'm starting in the fall. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. College? Mom's voice was sharp. In another state? But what about your family? What about helping your sister?" "I've been helping my sister my entire life," I said quietly. "This is something I need to do for myself." Dad stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. Without a word, he walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. "Now look what you've done," Mom hissed. Sarah just sat there with a slight smirk, probably already calculating how to get my room when I left. That last summer at home was like living with ghosts. I'd go to work at the cafe, come home, hand over half my paycheck, and retreat to my room. Mom and Dad barely spoke to me, just cold, necessary exchanges about bills or dinner times. The money they took from my paychecks they accepted without a word of thanks. When August came, I packed my bags alone. No tearful goodbyes, no family photos on the front porch, no Dad loading up the car like I saw other students had. Just me, my 2 suitcases, and a bus ticket to Riverside State. "I'm leaving now," I announced that morning, standing in the kitchen doorway. Mom kept washing dishes, her back to me. Dad rustled his newspaper. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. "Okay," Mom said, like I'd told her I was going to the grocery store. The bus ride to college was 4 hours of pure relief. With each mile I felt lighter, freer. My dorm room was small but clean, and my roommate, Jenny, became the sister I'd always wished I had, supportive, kind, interested in my life. I threw myself into my finance classes, loving every minute of learning about investment strategies and market analysis. My professors praised my work ethic, and for once, there was no one around to take credit for it. The rare calls home always followed the same pattern. "Sarah's thinking about becoming a model," Mom would say, not asking how I was doing. She was just waiting for the right opportunity. Dad would add, ignoring my attempts to share my own achievements. In my junior year, Sarah graduated high school. Mom called specifically to tell me about it, though not because they wanted me at the ceremony. "Sarah's taking some time to figure things out," Mom explained. "Her grades weren't quite college material, but we told her not to worry about it. The right job will come along." I thought about how they pushed me to work at 16, how they'd taken half my earnings, and how they'd fought my college dreams. "What's she doing in the meantime?" I asked. "Oh, just exploring her options," Mom said breezily. "We don't want her to rush into anything she's not passionate about." I graduated with honors. My name was at the top of the dean's list. Jenny's family cheered for me at graduation, since mine didn't come. 2 weeks later, I was back in my hometown, starting as a junior financial analyst at Reynolds and Associates. My starting salary was more than my parents made combined. The first time. I could afford my own apartment. I felt like I could finally breathe. But as soon as word got around about my job, the dinner invitations started. "You must be doing well for yourself," Dad would say, eyeing my professional clothes. "We're so proud," Mom would add before launching into another story about Sarah's latest job interview or modeling prospect. Sarah would sit across from me at these dinners, still glued to her phone, still looking for the right opportunity. At 19, she hadn't worked a day in her life, but somehow that was fine. I was the one they looked to with expectant eyes, dropping hints about bills and home repairs. "The property taxes have gone up so much," Mom would sigh. "It's hard to make ends meet these days," Dad would add. So I started giving them money, $500 here, $1,000 there. But their hints kept coming, their expectations growing with each deposit I made. The more I gave, the more they seemed to expect, like I was making up for the crime of leaving, of building my own life. The day I got promoted to senior financial analyst, I made the mistake of mentioning it to Mom during our weekly call. Within hours, she'd planned a celebration dinner at their house. "We're so proud of you, honey," Mom said, but her voice had that particular tone I knew too well. "It's wonderful that you're doing so well, especially since things have been so difficult here," Mom added, "Right on cue." Dad sighed heavily. "The company's making cuts again. They've reduced my hours," he said. "And these bills," Mom added, pulling a crumpled paper from her pocket. Her eyes were already welling up with tears. "I just don't know how we're going to manage the utilities this month." I glanced at Sarah, still absorbed in her phone, wearing designer jeans that I knew Mom and Dad couldn't afford. I wanted to point out that a 22-year-old capable of spending hours making dance videos could probably handle a job application or two. The words were right there on my tongue, but I swallowed them back. Then Mom dropped the bomb. "You know, Ella," she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand, "we've been thinking. You're spending so much on that apartment of yours. Why don't you move back home? You could save money and we could help each other out." I felt like I was 16 again, watching my hard-earned money disappear into their pockets. The thought of giving up my peaceful apartment, my independence, my space, it made my stomach churn. But as I opened my mouth to refuse, I saw the familiar guilt-inducing looks on their faces. "Okay," I heard myself say, and watched their faces light up with joy. A week later, I was back in my childhood bedroom. The room felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown too big for it. I laid down my conditions quickly. "I'll help with the bills and groceries, but I won't be cooking or cleaning. I did enough of that growing up." Mom agreed immediately, too quickly, really. It wasn't until I heard Sarah's outraged shriek the next day that I understood why. "What do you mean I have to clean?" she wailed. "I don't even know how to use the vacuum cleaner." "Well, it's time you learned," Mom said in a tone far gentler than she'd ever used with me about chores. "Ella's helping us financially so you can help with the house." I watched from my doorway as Sarah stomped around with the vacuum, barely touching the carpet, muttering under her breath about how unfair it all was. She'd post passive-aggressive stories on Instagram later about forced labor and unfair treatment. But I couldn't bring myself to care. After all, she was still living off my money, my grocery payments, my utility contributions, my rent equivalent that mysteriously never seemed to reduce our parents' financial strain. The least she could do was learn how to clean a bathroom. "Ella, have you noticed how shabby the house is looking?" Mom mentioned casually one morning over coffee. "The paint is peeling and that wallpaper in the living room." Dad joined in immediately. "The bathroom fixtures are pretty outdated, too. Sure would be nice to give this place a facelift." I knew what was coming. 3 days and several hints later, they finally asked outright if I would help with some home improvements. By help, of course, they meant pay for everything. I ended up spending nearly $30,000 on repairs and renovations. New paint throughout the house, updated bathroom fixtures, modern kitchen appliances, hardwood flooring to replace the old carpet, and fresh wallpaper in every room. I even had the exterior painted and the garden landscaped. The transformation was remarkable. I had to admit, the house looked like something out of a home improvement magazine. And suddenly, our house became the social hub of the family. "You must come see what we've done with the place," Mom would say on the phone to relatives and friends. "We've made such wonderful improvements." I'd sit quietly during these gatherings, watching Mom and Dad beam with pride as guests praised their beautiful home and excellent taste. Not once did they mention that I'd funded the entire renovation. Not once did they acknowledge that their improved lifestyle came from my bank account. As Christmas approached, they planned their biggest gathering yet. Mom invited every relative within driving distance, plus all their friends. "It'll be perfect," she kept saying. "Everyone will see how well we're doing." I spent a fortune on gifts for everyone, including a new laptop for Sarah that she'd been hinting about for months. Christmas Day arrived, and the house was packed with people admiring the renovations and enjoying the catered food, which I'd also paid for. When it came time to exchange gifts, I watched as Sarah unwrapped a brand new iPhone from our parents, complete with all the accessories. Her squeal of delight could probably be heard next door. My gift from them. A bath set from the drugstore that they'd kindly picked up last minute when they'd forgotten someone. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and thanked them, then watched as everyone opened their expensive gifts. I bought them. Nobody seemed to notice the disparity. Nobody seemed to care. The party was winding down when Mom cleared her throat to make an announcement. "Linda and her kids are staying with us for a few days," she said, gesturing to her friend from out of state. Linda smiled warmly, her 2 teenage children looking tired after the long drive. "That's nice," I said, already thinking about how cramped the living room would be with 3 people sleeping there. But Mom wasn't finished. "Ella, you'll need to clear your things out of your room. Linda and the kids will be staying there." I stood there in the middle of the living room, still processing what I just heard. Linda and her kids shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension. "They can stay in the living room," I suggested, trying to keep my voice level. "We can set up the pull-out couch and bring in the air mattress." "Don't be ridiculous," Mom snapped. "They're guests. We can't make them sleep in the living room. They'll be uncomfortable there." The irony of her concern for their comfort hit me like a slap. "And what about my comfort?" I asked, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "Did you think about that at all?" Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Stop making a scene. Just pack your things and move to the living room. It's only for a few days." I looked around at the house I'd renovated, at the Christmas decorations I'd paid for, at the presents I bought. Something inside me snapped. Why can't they stay in Sarah's room? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's head snapped up from her new iPhone, her mouth hanging open. Mom and Dad looked at each other like I'd suggested setting the house on fire. "I can't believe you'd even suggest that," Sarah sputtered. "That's completely out of the question," Mom said firmly. "Why?" I pressed. "Why is it okay to displace me but not her?" Mom's face turned red. "You're embarrassing me in front of my friend," she hissed. "This is not how we raised you to behave." "If you can't show proper respect in this house," Dad thundered, "then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. Get out." Mom added, her voice shrill, "Get out until you learn some manners." I looked at them, really looked at them. At Mom's self-righteous anger, at Dad's red face, at Sarah's smug little smile. Not one of them seemed to remember or care that I was the one who paid for the roof over their heads, the food on their table, the presents under their tree. I didn't remind them. Instead, I walked upstairs to my room. The room they wanted to give away like it was theirs to give. My hands were steady as I packed my suitcase, as I made calls to find a hotel or hostel that had vacancies on Christmas night. The Paradise Inn, a small hostel on the edge of town, had 1 room left. I booked it immediately. 20 minutes later, I walked down those beautiful hardwood stairs I'd paid for, carrying my suitcase. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody said a word. Sarah just smirked and went back to playing with her new iPhone. The Paradise Inn wasn't much, a small room with a lumpy bed and a bathroom down the hall, but it felt more like home than my parents' house had in years. I spent New Year's Eve there alone with Chinese takeout and my laptop, searching for apartments. I found a 1-bedroom apartment in a modern complex across town, far from my parents' neighborhood. My phone buzzed constantly those first few days, texts and calls from my parents and Sarah. I didn't read or answer any of them. I bought furniture I actually liked, not just what my parents would approve of. I painted the walls colors I chose. I created a space that was entirely mine. 2 weeks after I moved in, Mom finally caught me off guard. I answered my phone without checking the caller ID, a mistake I wouldn't make again. "The utility bills are due," she said without preamble, her voice sharp and demanding. "Linda and her kids are gone now, so you can come back. Your room is waiting." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. No hello, no apology, just another demand. "No," I said quietly. "What do you mean, no?" She sounded genuinely confused, as if the possibility of my refusal had never occurred to her. "I mean no, Mom. I'm not coming back, and I'm not paying your bills anymore." After a minute of astonished quiet, the explosion I had anticipated occurred. She screamed, "How dare you? This is how you pay us back for everything we've done for you. By leaving your loved ones behind when we need you." I listened to her tirade for a while, hearing the same old accusations and guilt trips. They stopped touching me. When she paused to get her air, I added, "You made it very clear how you really feel about me. You've demonstrated to me that I am merely a checkbook. That checkbook is now closed. Please don't give me another call until you're prepared to show me respect." Before she could answer, I hung up. After then, the calls and texts became more intense. Voicemails regarding family duties were left by Dad. Sarah used deceptive messaging to claim that my selfishness was causing her pain. Mom went through phases of anger and emotional guilt trips. They were all blocked by me. Months came after weeks. I started taking yoga courses, got another promotion, and poured myself into my work. I learned about what was going on at my parents' house from common friends. For the first time in years, they were having trouble paying their expenses. Sarah, who had always detested the unglamorous employment, had been forced to accept a position as a cashier at the neighborhood supermarket. She was reportedly awful at it, as seen by her many sick leave requests and complaints about having to stand all day. Their parents were telling everyone they could about their ungrateful oldest daughter who had deserted them when they needed her. They would tell intricate stories about all they had given up for my education, none of which was real, and how I had betrayed them as soon as I succeeded. Some individuals allowed them to be believed. Actually, I had been the responsible one, the obedient daughter, and the family ATM for 25 years. I needed to be myself now. The irony is that I now genuinely appreciate them. For that final Christmas night when they went too far, not for the years of control and manipulation. To discover who you are, sometimes you have to lose everything.